Thanks, Mike. Good morning. Did you all have late nights last night? I can see it on some of your faces. So I understand that many of you come from learning backgrounds, educational backgrounds. And it reminded me of a story about a teacher. And this was a first grade teacher, and she was teaching her students about whales. And she said, you know, it's amazing. There are these enormous mammals, but they have very small mouths. So they can only eat limited things. And so Sally's in the back of the room, and she raises her hand, and she says, but teacher, I just learned in Sunday school that Jonah was swallowed by a whale. And this teacher starts to get a little impatient, and she says, Sally, that's just a fable. That can't happen in real life. And Sally thinks a minute, and she says, well, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah. And the teacher, who at this point is really mad, says, well, what if Jonah went to hell? And Sally says, then you ask him. Hopefully, you know, we do have challenges as educators, but hopefully you don't have a challenge like Sally. So I was asked to talk about building brands, and I'm also going to talk about building businesses because they go hand in hand. And I'm going to start with a story about a time when I didn't do such a good job in building this business. And the reason is I didn't know about the critical importance of connecting with your customer. Building brands is all about, it starts and it ends with your consumers. And whoever they may be, you know, in your universe of work, that is what building brands is always about. And I didn't know that when I was a few years younger. So I started my media career at HBO, and it was quite exciting. It was the go-go days of HBO, and we were facing technology challenges. Back then, it was the VCR. Anybody remember VCRs? Few of you. So I was there for 8 years, and I felt like my work was plateauing, and I was invited to help a company called the Z Channel turn around its business. So the Z Channel was an LA-based programming service, and it was all movies all the time. First-run films, classic, foreign, all movies. And of course, the Hollywood community loved it. The critics adored it. Problem was, it wasn't making any money. So my job was to try to help turn that around. Well, our new owners had an ability to get professional sports rights and to put them on the channel. So we had a meeting and we said, well, what if we expanded this channel and added, you know, the Dodgers and the Clippers and some of these other sports rights? The Lakers were taken, but other sports rights. And of course, I'm all excited about that. That's a great way for us to expand our audience. So that's what we did. And this is a while ago, so it's pretty grainy. But that's me on the very right. And that was the day we signed the Dodgers. And that was an exciting day for the Z Channel. And guess what happened? It was a disaster. I didn't think to ask our viewers what they thought of this idea. If only I had connected with them, I would have learned that, oh, I don't know, scheduling a Clippers game followed by a Fellini film wasn't going to hold viewers, right? And maybe it would have been better if we had scheduled it, all kinds of things, but we didn't connect. It was my job to do that. So I learned a really precious lesson. Everything you do when you're building a business and building a brand has to start and end with the consumer. Now, here's the thing. You may have a great idea for a business, or you may have a great idea for a brand or an enhancement to a brand, but you have to ask yourself, is it just me that loves this idea, or is the market going to be big enough to sustain this idea? And it calls to mind for me when we launched HGTV, at the same time the Golf Channel launched. Now, how many of you have watched the Golf Channel? Yeah, quite the majority of you, right? Although I'm guessing that 20 years ago, the number was 0. So here's what happened with the Golf Channel. 4 guys, 4 executives, who I knew they were my clients, thought, wow, we should have a Golf Channel. It doesn't exist. And, you know, they were right. It was a hole in terms of, you know, viewership, watching different categories. But they were so convinced that this was going to be a success that they created a premium model. So if you wanted the Golf Channel, you had to pay $6 to $8 a month for it. Because they pay it, so why wouldn't anybody else pay it? And after they burned through a couple $100 million, they changed it to a basic model. And this is what I mean about when you're building businesses, when you're building ideas, brands, all of that, you have to make sure that the idea is robust enough and that you've got the model right. So this one, thankfully, we did get right. A few years back, it didn't exist, and today it's the anchor of a group of brands that we call Scripps Networks Interactive, and the business is today valued at over $10 billion. Take a look.
Is all I wanna do with you. Take my hand, we're gonna bust right through. 'Cause today we've got nothing to prove. You have made the path I'm walking on. I'm gonna lean on up when I cross the line. Standing higher, this moment in time. Gonna lean on up when I cross the line. 'Cause I believe in love. This moment in time. This moment in time. This moment in time. Gonna lean on up. Ooh, you have made the path I'm walking on. I'm gonna lean on up when I cross the line. Standing higher, this moment in time. When I cross the line, 'cause I believe in love. This moment in time. This moment in time. This moment in time.
So one of the first things we did, so I was employee number 2 at HGTV, and we brought together a team, a startup team. And one of the first things we did, the CEO, the employee number 1, his name's Ken Lowe, it was his idea to start up HGTV. And then he hired me, and then we fanned out and hired other people. But we got together and we said, okay, let's start with the consumer. And what problems did people have that this idea could help with? And all of us had either built a home or remodeled a home. How many of you have either built or remodeled homes? Yeah, most of you. So I don't know about you, but our experience wasn't very pleasant. And it was very frustrating along the way. And we said, okay, we could be a source of information, education, knowledge for people who are building homes. And then the next step we went to, okay, so we have an idea that could solve consumer problems, and we also did a lot of focus groups and whatnot to make sure we validated that there was a demand for this idea. The next thing we did is we said, how big is this market? How big potentially could this market be? So back to the cow cartoon, how robust of an idea was this? And we found that people were spending over $200 billion on their homes from inside and outside the home. Now, this was especially important to us because we were going to be financed by our parent company, E.W. Scripps, who at that point was an old line newspaper company who owned some television stations. And so we were pitching them to give us $25 million to start this business. And we had to give them the good news and the bad news. And the good news was that it's an enormous market. The bad news was that we were going to take some revenue from their broadcast television stations, and it would move to us. So they would actually see a change in the division, economics, which we were just starting out. We were this nascent, little group, but they were a pretty enlightened group, and they said, "Look, let's give it a try," and that was really important. So, does the idea have merit? How big is the market? And all of these questions are brand questions too, clearly. Then we looked at the competition. So who else was out there doing this kind of thing? And, no one had a dedicated 24/7 programming network on Home and Garden, but there were shows like This Old House and New Yankee Workshop back then. PBS had some shows, A&E had some shows. People were watching. That middle bar is those. We were going to be coming on the scene 10 to 15 years after established cable networks. And even today we find that people watch, maybe 8 to 10 channels. So how would we break through? But the story I want to share about this slide has to do with Better Homes and Gardens. So this was the grandmother of all shelter magazines. I mean, it was established. It had 5 million subscribers. And we thought to ourselves, we're this little idea company, maybe we need a partner. And so we called a meeting with Meredith, and we flew to Des Moines, where they're based, and we said to them, look, we're creating this television network that will probably have a few elements that are similar to the magazine, although it's going to be its own brand. But because we know that your readers will like what we're doing, how about we join in a partnership and you put some promotion in your magazine and we do all kinds of promotion on television for your magazine. And they politely declined. Why did they need us? So today, HGTV is in 98 million homes and Better Homes and Gardens in 5. Now, it still exists, and it's done a really good job of expanding its brand. But my point here is, as you're thinking through all of your business decisions, you can never underestimate the competition. It may be a garage band, which we were at that point, but just be open to partnerships because it's a very big business world out there, and partnerships are key to growing your brand. Okay, so how are we going to make this idea a brand? Every other network that had been out there at this point was that top left box, a cable TV network. They didn't even have websites. So these were all the things we envisioned this business, this brand could be to make it bigger than just a TV network. And you know what the most important, well, probably the cable TV network part is pretty important in the website. But other than that, the most important thing was having a direct voice to our viewers. I'd learned that at the Z Channel, and we had a problem that we had to figure out how to fix, which was our cable operators and satellite providers were the middleman to our viewer. So they controlled the relationship into the home. And back then, the internet was just starting out. So how did we get to our customers? And all of us that were sitting around the table back then came from television background, except one. He came from magazines. And he said, why don't we create a call center? And we'll put an 800 number on the back plates of all the shows, and people can call us. We'll train a couple of people on our shows. And when we first heard it, we thought, that's nuts. But then we said, that's brilliant. And this really speaks to having different disciplines around the table. And I know you know that in your work, because you see all the various types of disciplines in your organizations, and bringing them together is what makes the magic. So we did that, and it didn't cost hardly anything. We trained a couple of people. We put the 800 number on the back plates. People called. People really called. They started calling. And we learned such important information, like we had put a show called Star Gardens on the air, and this was sort of lifestyles of the rich and famous, except it wasn't really the famous because we couldn't afford the famous, so it was like B-grade movie stars, like Zsa Zsa Gabor, may she rest in peace. So we would show, Zsa Zsa walking around her back, beautifully landscaped area, and our viewers hated it. They said, these people don't pull one weed. What's most important is the integrity of the information. We don't care about movie stars. And do you know how critical that message was for us? Because it helped to bake the foundation of the brand, the information, as opposed to the people. Okay, so just to summarize this part, you have an idea, brand. You got to make sure you can build it into a big idea, a big brand, and you have to talk. The way to do that is to talk to your customers constantly. So now let's turn to the actual brand building part. So what did we do? What we did, it was really pretty simple. We created a discipline called the brand lens. And the way we did this is we got the folks that were closest to making the programming, the marketing, closest to our customers, and we came in our focus groups and our call center data, all of this we put together and we said, what are the words that will describe this experience for our customers? And this was back in the mid-90s, and these were the words. And this is what we looked like back then.
It's about life, where it's going to, all the changes that you're going through. It's about style, about what's important to you when you think about it.
It's about home. It's about home. It's about trust, like a helping hand. It's about family and friends when you think about it. It's about home. Life is your own. And you're building for tomorrow. It's about home.
Now, when you're building a brand, you have to, again, as I've said, it begins and it ends with your customers. And so you have to stay current with what's going on with them. What are their habits? What do they enjoy doing? What's going on in the larger market? So, we call those psychographics and demographics and all of those things. You need to be current and really know them. Now, we had that advantage of the call center, so we could know them and we continued to communicate. And what we were learning along the way was that tastes were changing. Reality TV was introduced. And, truthfully, we were and are a fairly conservative brand, and that's an important thing to know. It's not for everyone, right? Whatever your brand is, it's not necessarily going to be for everyone, just like your organization and your culture, which I'll talk about in a little bit, because your culture is a manifestation of your brand as well. So these were, we went back and we said, let's do another brand lens 10 years later. And these were the words that started to pop up. And today, this is what we look like.
Welcome to season 2.
Drew won last year, so I'm not playing nice this year.
Every week, each team will be renovating a different house. The team that adds the most value to their property will be safe from elimination.
It is absolutely stunning.
The team is a reflection of their leader.
Realtor David promises to find a new home,
You've got a great area over there.
while designer Hillary
I love what the house could be.
revive the house from front to back.
Whoa. You think you can paint the past away?
I'm in trouble.
Which house makes more sense?
Are you gonna love it?
Or are you going to list it? It's a hard call.
When you only have 3 days, we are in and out of the house, on the roof of the house, in the backyard of the house.
We contacted some friends at HGTV.
Time. We have no time. You never stop. The homeowner's coming home, and they have to come home to a finished house. Welcome to your new home.
My name is Nicole, and I'm addicted to rehab. I buy and sell houses, but I'm not your average flipper. I restore old homes to their former glory.
When I want to save a house, there is nothing that can stand in my way.
So one of the things we learned was that people actually did like to look at good-looking people. And I personally was really happy that we found that out. So that's why you see the Property Brothers and others on our air today. And we learned that people were getting used to the cuts being quicker and things like that. So again, all a part of working with your customer and making sure you stay current with what they're about. So the words, the language is really important because it helps you to be consistent and have continuity amongst when you're building a brand, so everyone's on the same page and they know what they're building. But so is your visual imagery. So, does anybody know what this is? So here's what I hear up here. I hear the men going, Tiffany box. I hear the women going, Tiffany box. I'm telling you guys, you do not have a healthy relationship with this brand. We're going to have to work with you on that. Okay. So this visual, you know immediately what this brand is. The golden arches, you know immediately what that brand is. And so we knew that that was really important for us too. And we decided to take the gable shape, which was, wonderful that there was such a thing, the roof line, and make that our visual so that every time you saw our brand, you knew where you were. And if you're going through 200 channels, you'd stop. If we did our jobs right, you'd stop and you'd stay with us. Because people's minds are cluttered with so much information today, more than ever before. So having some continuity with your visual imagery is really important. Okay, now, sometimes you may want to stretch your brand. And I think a company that's done a great job of that is Virgin. So they started out as a record label. And today, when you look at them, they're hotels, they're airplanes. My gosh, they're in aeronautics now. So that's an example of stretching your brand and doing it successfully, in my view. You can also stretch your brand and do it unsuccessfully. So in the lessons learned category, for us, we had this call center, and people were saying to us, I want to buy the products I see on your air. And we thought, well, we know that the information and the integrity of the information is so important. We can't do that. But what if we created like a QVC for home and garden, or bought a fledgling home and shopping network? And so we did that. We bought this small home shopping network called Shop at Home, and we transformed it, and we started selling home and garden products. And it was a mess. It was a real mess. Why? We knew how to do television, but the fact was we hadn't really thought through that this isn't a used television, but it wasn't a lifestyle network, which is what we were so good at. It was a store. It was a retailer. And none of us had any background in retail. So eventually, we had to liquidate this business, and it was an expensive but important lesson for us. Take a look at our attempt at selling knives.
1101-1816 is the item number on this one. And the nice thing about these practice katanas, oh, that hurt. Oh, that hurt big time. A piece of that the tip just got me, Odell. Oh, that got me good. You all right? A piece of that tip just got me. Oh, folks, right now, we may need emergency surgery in the studio.
You can't make this up. Odell was drunk. No, the good news was that nothing happened to that poor host. He was fine. But, so what do you do in that situation? Well, you learn your lesson. And we rethought what we should do. We knew there was a demand out there. What do you do with that demand? And we created the right model, which was and is that we work with our advertiser partners who are in the retail sector, like a Home Depot or Lowe's and others, and we have them, we create with them, we license our brands to them, and they carry things. So there's a whole line of Bassett furniture, HGTV furniture, Kohl sells a whole line of knives. That's the right model. But it took us understanding that and understanding that you can stretch your brand only so far. Okay. Now, I mentioned culture, which is a big, in my experience, a big manifestation of your brand. And sometimes I'm asked, how do you build a successful business? And I've shared some of that today, but it really is, I say it's ABC. A is you have to do all of the analysis to understand the market, the customer. B is you have to build it into a brand. And C is you need to have a strong culture. And, by strong culture, cultures are all different. So I came from 3 very different cultures: HBO, NBC, and then Scripps. All very different, all very successful. I knew, for example, when I was at NBC, that was not the place for me because of the culture. But it didn't stop NBC from being terribly successful. So what I'm trying to say here is It's important that you have a defined culture. It's foundational to your success as a company. And whether you do that, and I'll talk about how we did that, but what matters is that your employees know what the rules of the road are so that they can be successful. And I know you know this. When you work with your partners in your organizations, for them it's about being successful. How can I be successful here, and how can I make the company more successful? So they have to know how to treat people and how to behave in that organization. So for us, I was very fortunate because I was on the ground floor. So I could help to create this culture. And we had a meeting that I still think is the most important meeting we ever had before we got on the air to define our culture, to try to envision what this place could be. The people who would walk in the doors, what would their experience be of working there? And I have to tell you, having come from a couple political environments where women were not treated at all with any dignity, I came loaded for bear. I was the only woman, and there were 5 guys, and I had all my ammunition. Now, I'll show you that these were the core values where we ended up, and this is where they are today. But I didn't even have to really argue my case. This was a really magical team of men and me who had been in political environments, who had seen wives or daughters or others who had basically really been chewed up in organizations. So values like work-life balance, values like compassion, support, diversity, all of these things still today resonate in the organization. And this is the startup team. We took this picture a couple of years ago when we were celebrating 20 years of being on the air. The guys weren't bald when we started. The guys didn't have gray hair when we started. I mean, anybody who goes through a startup knows what it does to you. But today, the senior leadership team doesn't look like these people on the beach. It's half women, half men, several people of color. And what I learned as a woman, so I'll just say this to all of you, woman to woman, is that having a seat at the table is so empowering and can make all the difference in the world. So this is a shameless plug for my book, which actually is out there if you want a copy of it, and I've signed them. This talks about culture, and it's especially focused on helping women in the workplace. Okay. So, a few years back, HGTV didn't exist. Today, it's an anchor of a group of businesses that you see here that are, we continue to, with the new, the way people are watching television today, this is different. Again, staying with the customer, especially the younger group. They tend to, first of all, they don't have the money to buy a cable package. We have a millennial son, and he can't afford a cable package, so he just, he buys what they call over-the-top packages. And this is happening more and more, but just FYI, what our information is telling us is that the millennials are sort of settling the same way we did in terms of viewing patterns. And as Netflix, for example, continues to populate its air with great shows, with really memorable shows, they're coming back to Netflix to just see what's on. And so the brands like Netflix, 10 years from now, there will be 10 Netflix brands or maybe more. I don't know how many will break through, but it's the same viewership. You don't watch millions of things. You end up at a brand that you are comfortable with. So we're starting that work. It's more than started. We're doing a lot of short form and available on pretty much every platform. And we're in over 200 countries now, so we're available internationally as well. So that's the story of HGTV. I wish you all great success as you educate and you inspire. And just the most important thing I hope you take from what I said today is it starts and it ends with your consumer. So thank you.